Everyone, welcome to GTM Field Notes, a Syft series where we talk to GTM leaders about what is actually changing in the field, not the theory, not the LinkedIn hype, but the workflows, experiments, failures, and lessons showing up in real revenue teams as the age of AI has begun. I'm Imran Patel. I'm CEO of Syft. At Syft, we spend a lot of time thinking about how GTM teams operate and how they separate real buying signal from noise, and more importantly, how they act on that signal before it goes cold. Today, I'm joined by my friend and co-host Hahn, who has built and led multiple revenue teams across multiple categories, exits, IPO, plenty of hard lessons. Andrew, I'm excited for this one because Adam Ferris is actually exactly the operator we want in this series. He's been a VP of sales multiple times, a CRO, has been through exits, and has been worked across like both early stage and growth stage environments. So with that, I'll cue it up for you to introduce Adam.
I appreciate it. Adam, you get the double intro. So Adam, we're really excited to have you. For everyone watching, and Adam, I'd love to hear from you. You're a 4-time VP of sales, CRM, you have 2 exits. You've worked across early stage, you've done hyper growth. The current focus right now is helping organizations really codify and reinforce what makes you the individuality. The idea of culture, your way of operating, and your unique company DNA. Simply what your other companies can't really do. Add some sprinkles to that, man. A little background on your history and your new role as CRO.
Great. I think my background, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. Great to be with you, Andrew. Great to be with you, Imran. My background confuses applicant tracking systems. I've moved from category or industry to industry. I think I've done that initially with not so much thought, but what I've learned is over time, you recognize patterns across different categories and industries and commonalities, and some of the fundamental go-to-market motions and strategies and tactics that really are timeless, that haven't changed over time. The tactics will change. What worked 6 months ago probably won't work today, but there are some fundamentals that you can implement wherever you are. And what's really exciting, at least over the past 9 months, is how you can actually use AI to ensure that your sellers are selling in the same way. So you get the data, and so you trust the data, but they're selling with fundamentals and owning those fundamentals in their authentic voice, regardless of the motion, whether it's accelerated, tactical, like inbound, or a mid-market, or it's a more strategic enterprise sales. So super thrilled to be here, and built my career on building. So building in growth stages and early stages, and really love building. Right now I'm the CRO at a Series A company. We've raised $38 million. The founder was recruited by Steve Jobs to build out Apple University, and then got promoted to SVP of HR through the transition from Tim Cook. And so what we're doing here is really understanding how do you codify your cultural context, your operating principles, memorialize those and reinforce those in your systems so those permeate through the org and your employees show up in the way that you need them to, internally and externally, and execute. We believe that's a competitive moat, and our customers are really large global companies in the enterprise and the Fortune 1000.
2 things that you said that I really want to highlight before we get into the additional questions. I think you sold yourself short when you said you love to build. I think you have the unique talent of both building and scaling. And I think that's a rare combination in revenue leaders. I've met many that can do one or the other. The other thing, so believe it or not, Adam and I are doppelgangers, not in our appearance, but in our career. And I say this because you highlighted your expertise is more horizontal than vertical. Adam, I was wondering, do you want to tell the story, or should I tell the story of how we uniquely met? Because it sets some great context here.
I want to hear from you, and then
I want to hear my version.
Absolutely hilarious.
Long version short is Adam and we're both up for the same role about 2.5 years ago. VP of Sales Americas, the company that is absolutely dominating in Australia. They wanted to open a new market. Adam and I were both competing for it. It was so neck and neck. The CRO even said, "You two are identical and I can't tell the difference." At which point, Adam and I were both working with a career coach. And it turns out he was working with both of us. So rather than having contention and headbutting, I just reached out and said, "Hey, I want to speak to this guy because if he's neck and neck with me, I have my faults, he has his faults. We both have our talents. We're both in the same space." Adam won the job, and I couldn't have been happier for him. But it's a great example in this competition world where when you meet a great person in a mensch, you can remain friends after losing a role. So did I miss anything there, Adam?
Well, I think you're selling yourself short. I think the only reason why I got the job is because the CRO was a partner at Andreessen Horowitz and recruited the current CMO of CrowdStrike, who was the officiant at my wife and my wedding. And so I made that connection and back channeled it and sent her CRO a screenshot of Jennifer Johnson, JJ Johnson's text thread where I was like, it's who in your network and why you win deals in sales when you're interviewing for jobs. The other thing was, it was an executive career coach. There were two partners. I was meeting with one, you were meeting with the other, and shame on them. They weren't doing pipeline reviews of the candidates or.
In fairness, it was a huge organization of two people.
Exactly. It's a huge organization of two people. Folks, do your pipeline reviews.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Understand.
Interest. Just so
I love that that's your takeaway on how you got the job, and we will go back to this. So first of all, that helped. Second of all, I had connections. Third of all, I shit the bed at my final interview. So
I admire that how you made this like a win-win for both of you, Andrew. Like that was great.
Imran, the first conversation was awkward, but it was kismet. We really relied on each other and stayed in touch. And your network is your net worth. Part of the themes today is how you apply the human layer to AI, and really, how do you learn? We're all in learning mode, and it can create anxiety for some. You have to learn how you're going to learn. Some people are introverted, some people are extroverted, but at the end of the day, you need to practice, and you need to rely on folks like you that you admire and respect, and take away and glean what's going to be meaningful for you and how you can apply it, what makes sense to you. And so it's been great to keep in touch with Andrew ever since.
Appreciate it. Speaking of keeping in touch, you and I spoke a few weeks ago, and healthfully venting about the role of a CRO. So when I was younger, a CRO was responsible for sales, business development, marketing, potentially CS. And I'm just going to micro machine ramble through this. Now a CRO is in charge of sales, leadership, business development, BDRs, SDRs, RevOps, GTM coaching, channel and alliances, marketing, AI optimization, career pathing, executive collaboration, fundraising, public speaking, being an AE, competitive landscape and branding. And I'm only halfway through that list. I won't bore the team anymore. A question, AI prioritization. So where is it sitting within your organization? And part B, what are you owning personally that you nerd out on?
Wow. Yeah, we're responsible for a lot. And so how do you provide focus? Maybe it's the McKinsey 3 horizon strategy. We're like, okay, I have these North Star goals. I'm at this stage. How do I hold myself and my team accountable to that which is important in any given moment in time? That's really difficult. Who owns AI in our org, and how I think at a larger org, somebody's going to have to own AI in the aggregate for compliance and risk, and to memorialize and make the setup intuitive and operationalize the setup in the right way. Divisionally, we're a smaller team now. We're a team of about 8. And so I'm owning AI for the go-to-market. I think about it from the perspective of, how do we build pipeline? How do we generate revenue and optimize our revenue per head count right now, our bookings per head count? Because we have a smaller, flatter org, and that's probably going to be the org of the future. So when I think about what I've inherited Claude Cowork, which is super fun to use. And whereas before I was using Gemini and GPT and with really no forethought and how to operationalize that or systematize it. We have Google Workspace, we have Notion, we have HubSpot, we have LinkedIn Enterprise. Before I had a bigger stack, the standard stack that you'd think about, which is like Gong, Outreach, LinkedIn Enterprise, all the tools that you would use in a larger org. But we have a smaller stack right now. And so you hear these terms like agentic OS and system of record versus system of action. What does that mean for me in the go-to-market function and providing focus? So when I took on Claude, I'm learning right now, just like everybody else. Claude Cowork is really great. But really, you have to think about setting up yourself in Claude. And that's giving Claude a lot of context about who you are, what your role is, creating like anti-AI, kind of writing markdown files and connecting across your stack, but being thoughtful about how you connect across your stack, because you don't want to give Claude too much context and access to too much stuff, but you need a Claude Cowork folder with subfolders that Claude can access and get the right context for who you are, and then offer you advice as a collaborator, not outsourcing your critical thought and judgment to Claude, but as a true collaborator and teammate, where you're the human in the loop to say, tell me what you can help me with and optimize given the context I've given you. And that's really a critical setup, is setting up yourself first. And then some of the context would be like the 3 horizon strategy and that stuff. And then you can create like really cool repeatability, thinking about the concept of Claude or Copilot or whatever you use as a true collaborator. And that can come in the form of skills. So you can create a Claude skill where Claude is like a strategic finance and ops collaborator. You can turn Claude into an expert writer using your brand guidelines and your voice and your POV. You should always slow Claude down and use your judgment to ensure the output is who you are and refine that. But I've been doing other things recently, which is really fun and been yielded a lot of, I think, fruit for me, which is creating skills out of books that I admire. How do you combine like the Challenger Sale and the Jolt Effect? Because I really admire those 2 books, using intrinsic motivators and mitigating fear of messing up and also challenger sale techniques and applying that to my MedPick framework and Claude. How do you leverage Chris Voss and negotiating like your life depended on it and creating a skill out of that so you can add that into the mix, or really thoughtful books like Thinking Fast and Slow. And so like layering that in really provides Claude some context so that you're making Claude you and being a true collaborator so your authentic voice can think up. So that's self, and it's team. I can get into team.
Briefly, if you don't mind.
So the way I'm thinking about my team's pretty small right now, and it's pretty flat, but setting a Claude up for a team setting is really thinking about from the perspective of projects. So you have this 3 horizon strategy, you have OKRs and big rocks and KPIs. So each project should have one role. So give it your role, give it your company, give it your context, and ask it for one goal that rolls up to that North Star objective for each project. Then build the projects, maybe 3 to 5 of them. And Claude has that context layer and the deliverable for each project, and then add a teammate in. And you don't want to add in your best top performer because they're already doing something that's right. Maybe you add somebody who's overwhelmed with administrative tasks or bogged down and can't do the pattern recognition that we've learned over the years from our battle scars, Andrew and Imran. Bring them into the mix, and can they thrive? Can they be more efficient and productive there and lead the cycle in the way that you want them to while being their authentic self? And you can roll it out to the team, right? So that's the way I'm thinking about it.
I love it, man. I love it. That's actually really helpful. I think there's a lot of best practices that can be derived. Stalking you a bit on LinkedIn, you really describe yourself as someone that's operated across sales and revenue leadership, but you've also helped organizations really codify and reinforce what makes them unique, differentiators. Can you give us a practical version, like what you're working on now and what does culture become? When does it become a moat?
Oh, I'll give the Apple example because that's where CEO comes from. So when Steve Jobs first got cancer, he recruited our CEO from the academic world. He was the dean of Yale School of Management. And Steve had the foresight, the EQ to say, I need to preserve my taste. What is Apple? It's Steve Jobs' taste, right? So how do you preserve Steve Jobs' taste, his operating principles, his management philosophy, and the ethos of what made it? Through that transition where he'd have to transition to somebody else, eventually it became Tim Cook, and really preserve that cultural ethos, the way that he did his Apple employees to show up, because he truly believed that nobody could replicate what made Apple. And by codifying, preserving, protecting, reinforcing what made Apple would span the booms and busts of time, which is a really fascinating concept. And so recruited Joel Podolny into Build Apple University to train new cohorts on what makes Apple and existing cohorts and reinforce that training. And initially it was in live sessions, and then it became Apple University. And so Joel's thesis was, how do you create an adaptive learning platform that cohorts employees in the enterprise to create that peer-to-peer alignment and that social learning and the Socratic learning method, and reinforce that social learning with the gaps and force that expert instructor to learner engagement. We initially went after higher ed. Higher ed is a really tough nut to crack, and we don't want to be an LMS. We're never going to have all the features that Canvas and all the other LMS players have. But the newest iteration is layering in an AI judgment coach that where you can feed your artifacts in. The artifacts would be your values, your operating principles, your KPIs, your OKRs, what makes you, your mission statement, and it reinforces that judgment. It's anonymous for the user. It gives the org some actionable insights on those gaps in judgment across different systems and interactions internally and externally, and allows you to create adaptive learning paths that cohort employees to really stretch themselves and continue to reinforce and preserve how they need to show up. It's really fun, and it's a mouthful, so we need to figure it out.
It's like, would it be fair to categorize it as like an AI native LMS, or is that not the category that you would put yourself in?
So the category we're going to put ourselves is more like behavioral analytics, and we're going to be building the category of the judgment infrastructure. Now, how does that manifest itself? Could be a coach, that an application you buy and you're stretching yourself, and then you can act on it in an LMS to create social learning paths, whether it's ours or somebody else's or your existing stack, or buying our IP as a perpetual license patent on the balance sheet that will go as an asset. It's not going to be allocated to CapEx and OpEx. And where we can integrate into the systems you already have, Slack, Teams, GPT, whatever, or a coaching tool that you already use. So you can actually leverage our IP and our judgment infrastructure, but still retain all of the aggregate anonymized gaps and then act on them. So it's pretty cool.
This is a very fascinating topic, because like one of the things with LLMs is they represent the median or the average, right? And so When you say culture is a moat, how does that change in an AI world where like models are trained on the same data, everyone has access to the same tools, everybody like gets trained on the same prompts, like or same data sets, similar workflows? How do you then keep your individuality and taste when so much of it is baked into the model? And I guess this applies at multiple layers, right? Like if you have like, and maybe I'll challenge you a little bit, like if Honor has an IP that's trained across different organizations, right? Like is that like, how does it help me protect my uniqueness? And then within an organization, how does it protect an employee's uniqueness as well, right? Because a lot of alpha in organization is like because people spike in different directions, and organizations allow you to keep that variance generally.
I'll try to answer that in under 5 minutes. So Mark Cuban on May 4th be with you. Mark Cuban, love him or dislike him, posted, I'm coming to the conclusion that the biggest challenge for enterprise AI and AI in general as of now is that it's still impossible to make sure that everyone gets the same answer to the same question every time, which is a great response to the doomers. AI doesn't know the consequences of its output. Judgment and the ability to challenge AI output is becoming increasingly necessary and valuable. What makes us human? And launched results in February where they had 1,400 participants. They cohorted 50% of them and didn't give them AI. 50% of them, they gave them AI. 80% of those hundreds of 160 were when the AI output was incorrect. They believed the answer to be true and also became more self-confident at the same time concurrently. So they were accelerating their, or Wharton says, as cognitive suppression, this regression to the mean you alluded to, Imran, which is super dangerous. Imagine that in the aggregate, 6 months down the road, if everybody's regressing to the mean and we're outsourcing our cognition to AI, holy crap, who are we? Who are we as an org? Who are we as an individual? And that becomes a scary concept. So how do we do it? Well, first of all, it takes a lot of deep work. Are the values and tenets and mission and operating principles printed words on a wall and framed, or are they codified? Are they codified in the system where you're providing AI the context about your org, and then it has the context about you and your role and what your OKRs are. So when you combine those, it's like what I was talking about in the setup of how I set up myself on Cloud Cowork and then my team to provide the right context that matters so we can thrive, but we're still humans in the loop. And how it manifests itself in the product is it pushes you and it stretches you to show up in accordance to your operating principles every day, and it surfaces the gaps. And you get this metaphorical mirror of yourself and your team. You go, holy crap, I'm really outsourcing cognition, or I'm not showing up in the right way in this channel, sure, internally or externally with my customers.
Helpful. So AI has changed more in the last 6 or 9 months than it had in the 5 years prior. I'm sure when we look back at this in 6 months, we'll laugh at some of our answers because it's changing so quickly. But we've talked about how AI and GTM has evolved in the last 9 months. What did it look like for you 9 months ago in your last role? And what are you doing differently today that really has accelerated your success?
9 months, 12 months ago, I was maybe replacing junior and senior engineers and generating some code. There was still maybe that org flattened and there was still somebody senior who was the human in the loop to make sure that the output was sound. And then it moved into the support function. And then it's moved into the go-to-market function. 9 months ago, we were using Gemini and GPT licenses across the org. There was announcements about we were going to get tracked and we had to go grade our team on productivity and efficiency gains. But when we asked, like, how are we going to get tracked and what productivity and efficiency gains, what does that mean for go-to-market? What does it mean for the PR team? What does it mean? And we didn't get an answer. So,
and if I'm crushing my numbers, does anyone care?
And does anybody care? And can you correlate it back to like using AI? And there's the spectrum. There's like this bell curve distribution of literacy, proficiency, and mastery. So it's like, how do you look at the blended aggregate and say, oh, this is, it's correlated. So what were we doing? We were doing the things that we knew how to do that we could automate. How do you do account planning? Can we do some account orchestration? Can we layer in some signal intelligence using cobbling tools together like Clay and Gong and other tools? Can we layer in some trigger events with a credible excuse to reach out and like, oh, this person's like giving me a signal that they're high fit. Can we give our reps more context so they know what the next best action is? Can we help them craft provocative messaging, adding their own, those gems that we created and some of those plays, what to do, what to say, what to show, how to be, how to show up. It took a big cognitive load for the best reps could go connect the dots, and the best reps would take it to the next level and create their own scoring to go prioritize their own target account list in their book. But it took too much of a cognitive load for the blended aggregate of the team to actually execute on. And so I don't know if it really drove efficiency gains. The best reps became better. The bottom performers probably became more overwhelmed than ever. How has that changed now? Holy crap. Like there are 3 things that I've done just in this last week on Cowork that I never would have been able to do for my team, that I would have had to collaborate on and rely on, that would have taken a month. And there are 3, I can give you 3 examples if you want.
Go ahead.
Let's see here. As we're going to market, we're earlier stage, we're trying to label the problem. There are many problems we can solve at Honor Education. The first thing,
I'm actually going to pause you there because interesting. The consulting side of me, you explain what Honor did. One of the exercises I do is when someone tells me about their business, I'm like, what is your elevator pitch? How do you simplify this into 20 words?
Yes.
And the second question is, if you were explaining it to your mom, how do you simplify it even further? So that is a real challenge.
It's a challenge. It is a challenge at any earlier stage company, especially when you're building out a category where you have to say, I'm going to define what we are, actually label the problem, and present yourself as the only solution to solve the problem. And here are the use cases we solve for people like you and organizations like yours, right?
And what differentiates us from the competition, specifically why we're uniquely positioned to solve.
Why you're uniquely and defensively differentiated in your approach and your solution. What's comparative but unique? What's table stakes that you just like need to know about? It's like the Kyle assay play. So there are cool things I've done. There's 3 examples. So I'm proud and thrilled and excited and like, whoa. One is like a concept of a diagnostic. How do you go from founder-led to sales-led and take 30 years of expertise in Joel Podolny and the team at Apple and distill it down to label a problem for an org? Okay. Are you the tribal knowledge org? Are you the bottleneck org? Are you the AI exposed org? Are you the deliberately built org, which is really rare? Like, how do I label you and give you the metaphorical mirror where you say, cool, I understand what org, and then here are the 3 to 5 ways we solve that problem in a unique and defensible way. So I created this really cool front-end React app that gives you a diagnostic and asks some really thought-provoking questions that gives you a score and say, here's how we label you. Do you agree? Is this interesting enough? And can we tie it to a priority so we enter into an evaluation? That's the starting point. And I think we'll use that in our positioning and messaging. So that front-end React app is really cool and it's pretty fun to use. And I've done it on our own org, which is pretty fun.
Is that something that you deploy during discovery essentially?
You can do discovery. I think we can even put it on our marketing website and say,
okay, it's like a lead magnet as well.
A lead magnet as well. And it's a good starting point to say, oh, cool, I agree with that. We are a bottleneck org. Tell me more about how you solve my problems. Oh, great, that's interesting. I'll enter into an evaluation and bring in the buying committee. And then it's my job using that as a foundational layer to build the business case and catalyze a decision across a dysfunctional buying committee. The other one is I built a 12-month scenario-based model, like roll up and drill down waterfall model. And the output down to tactically breaks it down into the unit daily activities that we need to actually execute on to yield quarterly and yearly targets. It goes daily, weekly, monthly, and then across all channels and initiatives, funnel conversion rates, our exit criteria, given the sales velocity formula, qualified ops, ACV, win rate divided by sales cycle in days, constraints like ramp rep equivalents and ramp time, and it factors in like CAC and sensitivity. Wild. That would have taken me a month with rev ops and leadership and strategic finance and ops. I pumped it out in about 2.5 hours after I did my setup. And now you can look at it with the human layer and say, where's it wrong? Where is it going to break? And you can even prompt Claude and say, what are the risks? What is totally wildly wrong? But if you have good, better, best, then you have these scenarios you can work with in the inputs and the variable. And then what I did was, well, we don't have Clay, which would be awesome. Maybe we don't want to buy Clay. Maybe we don't want to as a data provider, but we have the luxury of targeting the Fortune 1000, which is easily identifiable online. Then I scrape the Fortune 1000 list, layer in our existing install base to find lookalikes, layering in some scoring criteria, attributes that really make somebody high fit, and the high fit personas, and then some trigger events to score, refine that scoring and tier. Now I have my target account list for like the foundational layer for ABX. I have tier 1, 2, and 3. And then it even mapped out the strength of connections across our leadership, investors, and advisors when I've downloaded their LinkedIn contacts, and says, here's the strength of the connections in tier 1 at that high fit lookalike accounts for these reasons. And here's the path to go network our way in to drive pipeline. And the next step is creating an agent to automate that and pre-draft some content for DMs, text, phone calls, and emails. Hold us accountable since we don't have outreach yet to like for that multi-step sequence, and then make it easy for people to refer. And that's something that would have taken a couple months, I think, before 6 months.
Not just that, 2 years ago, there were companies that literally specialized scraping your connections, understanding who is not the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but the 1 degree of B2B, and doing the intro. And I think that's the greatest example of build versus buy. And someone signed a 3-year agreement with them, and it's an antiquated solution that you can build in-house in 2 hours.
Is this a waste of my time? This is the fundamental work I need to do, I think, to refine our message and understand what we need to do daily to yield outputs on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis to hit our goals and where it could break, how to report back to the board on that, and focus our team on the highest fit ICP and personas. But within that, you can go down a rabbit hole and you go, oh crap, you need somebody to be the AI orchestrator like in RevOps. And I think their job is wildly evolved. I do need a growth marketer to go amplify, and how do I own that message on an own channel? And then like
create the brand.
Is it that like in this case, this is like by the all very solid examples. And what did AI actually replace here, right? Was it labor? Was it expertise, right? Or mostly it's like it was just like cost or speed? Like what was the dimension along which you would attribute the success of like this DIY projects that you did?
Like speed is the easy one. So operational efficiency for me and for our team, like the amount that I can produce. Now, is it good work? I don't know. This is where you come in as a human, say, is this good or not? Is the output good? And you really need to dissect it and then refine. Is it replacing the RevOps function? I don't know. Maybe you don't need a RevOps leader with some RevOps underlings and some analysts to go do this in a strategic. I still probably need a strategic finance and ops person. I still need a RevOps team or sales and marketing ops team. But do I need 4 of them? Maybe I need 1 who knows how to build agents and build on and be a collaborator with me, and we can collaborate to really orchestrate. And I don't know if I need that yet, but like maybe it does replace some labor, but it definitely helps us output. And what you have to keep asking is it the right output? And is it valuable? Does it roll up to those OKRs, your horizon strategy, whatever you have? And I think that it's this fine balance, a teeter-totter of like outsourcing your cognition, and then the Dunning-Kruger effect, you're on top of Mount Stupid, like I don't need anybody. It's like, you need humans in the loop. What's the right mix? And where do you buy?
And is that like when you build these systems, right? The things that you just talked about, the assessment tool that you built, and then the Fortune 1000 prioritization and ABX list. How do you see those? Like, because one thing that we see is like it's very easy to get to 80% with vibe coding and like build a tool. But then like in software, as they say, 20% is the last 100%. So how do you then like organizationally make sure that those tools and whatever you build out, they're like systemized, they're like operated well, they're maintained? Like in your org, like where do those tools go? Is it now RevOps? Is this like a tiger team that you created for this thing? And different companies do it very differently, but like I want to hear like how you do it at Honor.
If I were to do this again at Deputy, my last company, absolutely, like I could go down a rabbit hole and keep doing this stuff and geeking out on it because I'm nerding out on it. But there's an opportunity cost there. Is this a good use of my time? Do you need to build a team around that to orchestrate it and systematize it? And I know I'm not that person. Like that's not a good use of my time. And that's when you need to really rethink your stack. I could go by Day.ai as the AI native CRM built by the chief product officer at HubSpot, but a lot of Day.ai customers use Salesforce and HubSpot as well. So it needs to pull in from a system of record. I could buy Inflection as a marketing tool, but is HubSpot better than Inflection? I don't know yet. And I need somebody else, maybe somebody or a team eventually to go really apply that expertise to say, this is how the right stack and this is the right system of action that we can build now with these new exciting tools that will scale. Because I'm not that person, right? And I shouldn't be that person, right?
It goes back to the initial question. If you're the smartest person in your organization on building this, how are you doing your other roles? And
I'm a CRO, but I'm also an SDR and I'm an AE, and like I need to then scale from there. And maybe my org will be smaller and flatter than it has been in the past. So I'm fine with that. At the end of the day, I need to go scale revenue, right?
You nailed it. What you're responsible for is outcomes over outcomes.
So those new hires, though, how do you tie them into? When do you realize, this opportunity cost is too great for me to build, need an expert, and how are they going to add value so we can scale and maybe maintain a flatter org? I don't know. That's, I think, something that we're all learning, and some of us do it better than others. I'm certainly learning that. There are some buy decisions that I'd probably make, like Attention.com is a great example. They're going gangbusters, embraced agents from the get, and they really can ingest handle data hygiene and democratize what good looks like in your org. And there's Fluent.io, Nate Nassarella's company is fantastic. Like how you like, and talk about the unique comparative and table stakes, like mutual success plan. I can do all that stuff. I'm probably not suited to build that. InAccord is another one. It's like account mapping, mutual success plans. Like it gives you a digital sales room. Like I'm not going to go build a digital sales room. Like there are tools out there that I'd probably buy that may or may not exist, but they're pretty awesome and they're very thoughtful. I shouldn't build that. I should be selling.
Like what would you build versus what would you buy with AI?
Ooh, it's a good question. It's a good question.
Let me add part two of that while you think. I'll give you a pregnant pause. I love multi-year deals. Are you buying in single year because of your concern about how quickly technology and AI are emerging?
Well, we're in sales, so we always want to sell 3-year deals or 2-year deals. And depending on your stage, like annual upfront. Or if you're in a paid POC, it auto activates after clearly defined success criteria, not contingent on KPIs you can't hit, but product specific terms like can your product do Y and Z? But as a buyer, you're always going to negotiate a year or a 6-month POC.
Well, that's the challenge that we have. We want to buy in the short term and sell in the long term.
Yeah, of course. It's pretty wild out there. Imran, I don't know if I have a scoring rubric yet. Maybe Claude could create one for me. Maybe you have one. I have my own scoring rubrics that I'd use to score the decisions I made during my interview cycles when Andrew and I were interviewing. And so like, what are the attributes of the company that matter? What is the role? What are things that I don't want to do that are slogs, things that I do want to do? What's my future state? Like, and I have decision trees and frameworks. I haven't created one yet for build versus buy. So if you have one, bring it on.
I think that is a bit of a segue into our next question as well. That I know that it's a topic that you wanted to discuss, which was about systems of record and systems of action, right? And so like from a tooling perspective, what we are seeing right now is like systems of records are incredibly sticky. You don't go rip them out. You don't like LMS or like any of those marketing automation platforms. Systems of action and like workflow automation, like that seems a little bit more up in the air, right? Because like, and I think it's just not from like other, like it's just that Claude and ChatGPT, at least what we see in our space. And my theory is just that whole orchestration and workflow layer is a little bit being hollowed out by Claude and by the LLMs and by the agentic framework. So that's how we think about it at Syft as well, right? Like we are both like we are a data and activation layer for data. The activation layer does overlap a little bit with orchestration. And so you do signal-based triggers and all that stuff that you were talking about. And so like, and data isn't going anywhere, in my opinion. It's like you need it. It's the key to building AI systems, right? But I think it's everybody's trying to figure out like what are their core competencies and where they should outsource based on those and what they should build in-house. So let's move on to that next question, actually.
I have a thought on that.
Please.
So you wanted to talk about source of record and source of action, and everybody has like different definitions of what a source of record and source of action is. What do those terms mean to you?
Source of record, the repository for the context for me, for everything go to market. How is that going to change? Maybe it's going to be in a context graph in a vector database in the future where you actually then you're continuously investing in enriching and enhancing and investing in that signal intelligence and those trigger events so that somebody like a newer, more modern RevOps function can ensure that those systems are connected and communicating, and that context is always evolving in the way you need it to, and then building agents on top of that so people can act. They can query, they can visualize data. It's like democratized down to the IC level. You asked me a really great question, which is when do you build versus buy? I can tell you where my TAM, SAM, SOM, and target list will break. It's going to break on validated data, even though we're targeting Fortune 1000. How do I make it simple to act? And how do we continuously enrich in that system as we evolve our ICP and high-fit personas, and maybe those triggers and signals change because they will. And that's the inflection point that I'd probably say there's too much of an opportunity cost for me to keep slogging away at this and maintaining it with my team, and I buy and invest, right? And that might come with a different stage in our evolution, right?
How many Fortune 1000 companies are?
They're easily identifiable.
When you talk about your target, talk about your target addressable market,
when you think about going toward the long tail of velocity motion and mid-market motion, those kinds of companies, the ICP, the accounts, the contacts and leads at those accounts, if it was leading a team that targeted the long tail or the mid-market, you'd have to buy. You have to buy a data provider and invest in that signal intelligence and trigger events. Because if you generate the best content in the world using Claude or whatever, but you haven't defined your ICP and your personas and those plays, then you could hire a bunch of SDRs sending slop and being sales drones to everybody, and they'd be pumping out output or activities, but yielding very little output. So it's that constant investment enrichment and signal intelligence and trigger events and the refinement when you inspect that will yield the right results. And maybe you don't need as many SDRs when you do that, but it's that trade-off of investing and buying.
It's such a great point, because those two motions are something that our customers do with Syft quite a bit. And we do GTM engineering for some of the stuff that you're talking about, taking the list and building the list, making sure all the signals hang off that list. But my theory is that, or what we observe is that the enterprise motion, the data is difficult to get. It's a very relationship-based motion. So there is a human layer that makes sure that the data is always up to date in a way. And so it can scale, as Andrew was saying, because there are 10 AEs, 20 AEs, and they can divvy up those accounts. And if they have they have a pulse into the account, right? Whereas once that 1,000 becomes 10,000 or 100,000, it's just impossible for a human to keep tab on. That's where you really have to invest. So they both have data problems. It's just that people have surmounted them with different, you can't do it with humans in the mid-market. Maybe you can do it with humans in Fortune 1000. But even there, again, I think what we are seeing is a lot of companies would rather actually employ a lot of AI to figure out what's happening within Coca-Cola. And then if there are some higher level signals, that's when they can have the AEs go look at their account, right? So I think AI is permeating on both sides. On the mid-market side, people use AI to even do the first touch, right? And we do that. For example, Syft has you can do first touch with Syft AI agents on LinkedIn. And so, I think the data problem is still. I think AI is very good, well placed to attack the data problem on both sides of the market right now, from what we see.
I agree. How long can I sustain this? Right. And at some point, there's too much of an opportunity cost to keep doing this a little bit manually, albeit I'm proud of what we built. This is really fun and cool, and it's going to get us to a certain point. But at some point, we need to go layer in some automation and make the call that we're going to continuously invest in the context, in the signals, in the trigger events. A great tactical example of Deputy was we were the best in productized labor and wage compliance in the market. Okay, so what is a good signal? First of all, target the accounts that have headquarters in compliance-heavy states, and what are the right accounts? And then target accounts that have either been sued or in active litigation for labor and wage compliance, or one of their litigated cases or municipalities or document repository. How do you go surface that and then give the context and the signal at the right time and the message so that the reps can act on it and drive pipeline with a point of view? That's something that needs to be continuously invested in, because litigation is always happening, right? People are always getting sued. That needed to be a buy decision.
Imran, we probably have time for one more question or a close-up. What do you think a good final takeaway that we can derive from Adam?
I think what I'm interested in is give us one AI end on a downer, but I think a lot of times failure teaches a lot of things as well.
We either win or we learn.
No, you learn through acting and then being self-compassionate.
No, and what happened? What did you learn from it?
Listen, it's the problem that Andrew and I have experienced throughout our entire career. You can create all the playbooks in the world. You can create the elevator pitch. And so in my last company, creating siloed gems and expecting younger reps with less battle scars to be able to connect the dots basically fail every time. Only on that bell curve distribution of literacy, proficiency, mastery, only that top 5-10% will actually be able to execute on those plays when you've created these siloed agents doing very specific tactical tasks and you're not connecting the dots to them. So that's when you invest, right, in that orchestrator.
Love that. I recently heard that a rock star we used to define as a top performer. No, a rock star is a rock. They are a foundation. They are low touch, low need. They're going to hit between 80 and 110% of their number. We like rocks.
And so buying systems, cobbling them together without the thought on truly orchestrating it, and that continuous investment and scale is going to be more critical than ever now that we have cool tools like Claude and Copilot and Gemini at our disposal.
What would you have done differently, learning that siloed execution didn't work for you?
And be nice to yourself. It wasn't a bad decision, but the takeaways.
No, you rolled out too many gems at one time for too many tasks in the motion. So it's how do you roll out one, pause? If you look at your funnel stages, sometimes it's not a linear equation. If if you have a huge drop off from stage 1 to stage 2 and then smaller drop off, maybe if you solve that smaller drop off, it actually has more massive impact on the bottom of the funnel. So analyze your stages. What can you go apply now to that stage so that you're having an impact on the bottom of the funnel? Roll it out with one goal, disseminate it, and start with maybe somebody who's struggling, and then roll it out, inspect, test, optimize, and expand out from there. We just rolled out a bunch.
It's almost like when we ask the question about being new in your role, it's almost like what are the so let's take AI out of the equation. What are the short-term wins that you could make to really impact your team? And what are the mid and long-term goals that you're trying to achieve? And then apply AI to the same philosophy.
It's what I'm going, like, I can keep going down this rabbit hole, but I need to pause and
close deals.
So like, where do I stop and stop my own learning, my own evolution, and say, this is good enough for now in this moment of time. Let's pause and inspect and then optimize, right?
I think the depth of deployment right now, I think everybody's learning it beats the breadth of deployment with these things, because there's just only so much organizational capacity or bandwidth do you have to roll out. Like, it's a change management problem. And that's why, like, in the last 1 or 2 days, like, all these companies have announced like forward deployed engineering and firms, right? Like, and like OpenAI and Claude and Google yesterday, just because they understand it's just very hard to get any change deployed so quickly. And so they're investing in that. So this is a great note to close this on. Adam, this was great. Thank you.
I have one more comment. If you don't know where to start, overwhelming, try to do a project for a personal project that you're going to geek out on. So I did one where I just took up golf about 12 months ago.
Right.
I'm learning, and I created an AI caddy. It analyzes the clubs in my bag and says, cool, what are my distances now with the clubs that I have? Where is there overlap where I can take out a club, or what do I need to strive to in my technique and practice to like narrow those gaps in the distances that I can hit? And then the caddy will always keep me accountable. And it's like a React app that I've hosted on Netlify, and I can just like plug in my distances and see how I'm improving or not improving and which clubs I need to fill in the gaps. Super fun. Like, I'm like, this is great. And it's green and it's branded and like, it's fun to use, and I don't need to buy something, and then it's something personal. So
you've inspired me for my next fantasy draft.
There you go.
When does the app hit the app store? Like, we can have Adam come back next and like talk about that app and plug it. But,
if I showed it to Andrew, he would just laugh at me and say, "Oh man, you suck."
I just drink a couple beers and rip and hopefully get close to the pin. But I love your methodical and structured view upon this.
You're like Brooks Koepka. He doesn't even use a book for like distance book or whatever you call it. I'm learning the terms. Cool, guys.
Thanks. Thank you, Adam. This was great. We are at the hour. And again, like, I really admired the way you talked about human AI collaboration in this era. And really, like, how do we elevate GTM leadership by doing? I think you're like a great exemplar of that, which I think a lot of other folks in the space can look at. And that's one of the reasons why we're actually doing this show is called Field Notes, because actually we want to hear from people, from operators who are seeing from what's happening at 10,000 feet, but they're also in the weeds and trying to work it all out. So this is a great conversation. Thank you again.
Thanks for the opportunity, Andrew.
Go crush it. Later.